Welcome to this course. Great to have you on board. My name is Maximilian Schwarzmüller, and I'll be your instructor in this course. Now, in this course, you will learn everything about CSS, cascading style sheets. We'll have a closer look at what CSS is in the next video, but you will learn it in this course from the ground up, and not just in theory. We'll build an entire course project with CSS. We'll start with the basics and gradually enhance it with more and more CSS features. Now, I'm working as a freelance web developer, and therefore I work with CSS day to day. I can tell you getting started with it is easy, but it also offers a lot of features which can be complex, but which also allow you to build powerful websites. Now, I'm not teaching the course alone though.
Now, who am I? I'm Manuel, I'm also a web developer, and together with Max, we are Academind, and our goal is to teach you how to become a web developer. For that, you will dive into the practical side of CSS throughout this course. As Max told you, we will create a real-world project. But in addition to that, you will also have assignments, quizzes, and a lot more to really understand the theoretical concepts behind CSS. Because applying it is one thing, but you also have to understand the why. And with that approach, you will be able to confidently apply CSS in your own projects after finishing this course. You don't need to be a designer. You don't need to understand CSS or JavaScript. The only thing you need is some basic HTML knowledge. And with that, let's jump into the course right now.
So let's start with the most important question first. What is CSS? CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and I'll come back to that name and why it's called cascading later in the course once we know a bit more about it from a technical perspective. But the core idea behind CSS is that it makes your web page look good. Your web page typically consists of HTML, right? This is how you structure your web page. This is how you add content and show content on your web page. HTML is absolutely required. There are no web pages without HTML. CSS, on the other hand, is optional because CSS allows you to style that HTML content. It allows you to add colors, shadows, all kinds of visual effects, position elements differently. So basically, it allows you to turn your boring HTML page into an exciting, good-looking website. Let's have a look at this and let's see what exactly CSS can do for us. Attached to this video, you'll find a zip file which contains a HTML, a CSS file, as well as an image. Now, if you double-click that HTML file, simply double-click it, it will open a browser and you will see this. Now, this is a fully functional web page. It simply contains just HTML, but all the content is there, and if we were a user, it doesn't look good, but we could use it, we could work with that, we understand what the website is trying to tell us. However, we want it to look better, and that is where the CSS file comes into play. In your HTML code, and here I opened it with Visual Studio Code, which is the IDE we'll use in this course. You can open it with any text editor on your operating system. Just make sure you open it as plain text, but you may also use any favorite IDE you have. So if you open that file, this is the HTML code you see. Now let's add some CSS to it. And conveniently, I already provide you with that CSS file in that code.css file, which also is part of the zip file. There you see a bunch of things you probably don't know yet, and we'll walk through all these things in detail throughout the course. Now let's include that file by simply copying all the content in there, going back into the HTML file, and in the head section right before it's closed, you add the style element. So simply opening and closing style tag. Now between these two tags, copy in the content from the other CSS file, save the HTML file, go back to your browser, and reload. And this is exactly what CSS is all about. Doesn't this look much better? It does. And that's exactly why you use CSS. This now does not only contain the content, but it's also way more pleasant to the eye. So we'll learn all about this throughout the course. And with that, let's learn a bit more about what exactly CSS is and where it's coming from. So we had a look at what you can do with CSS. Now let's have a brief look at its history. A very brief one, I promise. So CSS was first introduced in 1996. We refer to this as CSS version 1. That was the first time you finally got tools to improve the look of your web page. Now only 2 years later, we got CSS version 2. The latest version of CSS, actually CSS version 3, that's the one this course uses, and it's still in development. Isn't that strange? Will there ever be a version 4 at some point of time? No, we'll never get a CSS version 4 because with CSS version 3, the concept or the approach towards CSS, towards the development of CSS changed. Rather than focusing on different versions, they now split up CSS into a couple of modules which are organized by the feature they cover. So things like modules on coloring text, modules which focus on shadows, modules which focus on animations. We get different versions of these modules, and new modules and module versions are continuously added in the future, simply to keep up with modern developments and to keep CSS dynamic. Here's an overview over the different working groups and their results who are working on improving CSS and developing new features. Now please don't read through all of that. We will cover the important features in this course in great depth. The important takeaway for you is that CSS simply keeps evolving. It still is under active development, and we will see new and improved features in the future too, simply to keep up with the general evolving nature of web development itself.
So what is this course all about? Let's have a look at the outline now. Because the course offers you 3 different tracks right here. The basic track, the advanced track, and the expert track. Now what's the reason for that? With these different tracks, we offer different entry points depending on your CSS skills. Now no worries, you can start the course right here. It builds up on the knowledge step by step. But in case you already have some advanced or expert knowledge, you can jump in later to really dive into the topics of your interest. Now with that, let's have a look at the basic track now, because at the moment we are almost done with getting started. After that, Max will have a look at the basics of CSS, and after that, dive even deeper into these basics. So we will talk about core concepts like selectors or the box model, for example. After that, in the next module, we will round up this basic knowledge by answering some common questions like, should I use an ID or a class selector? With that, it's time to practice what we applied so far. We worked on the project up to this point, no worries. But now we will apply all the knowledge we gained so far and make sure to give all the different pages on our website a nice styling. After that, I will take over and have a look at positioning. Positioning simply means that we are able to change the position of our elements on the website. Now with that, the basic track is done. Now we can continue right here with the next module, backgrounds and images, or if you are an advanced user, you can jump in right here into the course. In the backgrounds and images module, we'll have a look at, well, the style of backgrounds and images. So these 2 different concepts, how can we add them, how can we style them? After that, I will have a look at dimensions, sizes, and units together with you. And following that, Max will have a look at the way JavaScript can manipulate the CSS styles applied to a website. Following that JavaScript part, we are almost done with the core structure of our website. Therefore, it's then time to dive into responsive design, because up to this point, we created a desktop website. And although that's awesome, we also want to make sure that users who use a smartphone, for example, to visit our website, also experience a very beautiful styling. Now with the responsive design implemented, we'll have a look at forms. So we will learn how to add a form to our website and also how to add some cool styling to it. And finally, in the last module of the advanced track, we will have a look at text and fonts, because using the default fonts is okay, but we don't want okay, we want awesome. So with the advanced track being finished, we will continue with the expert track. And this track will begin with Flexbox, an awesome tool or concept that allows us to dynamically change the way our elements are positioned and displayed on our website. After that, we'll have a look at the CSS grid, a rather new CSS feature, and very important, not the same thing as Flexbox, but we will have a look at the way CSS grid works and also look at the differences between Flexbox and the grid. Now after the grid, it's time to have a look at transformations, because by adding transformations to our website, which allow us to, for example, rotate our elements, well, I think this is also a really nice feature we should definitely learn about. Now with the transformations, we'll also have a look at transitions and animations in the next module, because these are the feature that increase the user feedback and therefore make browsing our website an even better experience. Now with that, we are almost done with the course. There are only 2 modules left. In the next module, we'll have a look at writing future-proof CSS code. Because we learned already that CSS is constantly evolving, therefore we want to make sure to stay updated and to write future-proof CSS code already today. And the last thing we'll have a look at is Sass. Sass kind of enhances CSS and makes working with it a bit easier. So we'll have a look at that in this last module. And with that, we finished this complete guide. And now the question is, what does it take you to succeed in this course? What are the course prerequisites? What does it take you to succeed in this course? We talked about that already at the beginning of this module. You need to have at least some basic HTML knowledge. That's really important because CSS builds up on HTML and therefore knowing at least the basics, well, is a must. But the good news is that besides this basic HTML knowledge, no advanced web dev knowledge is required. You don't need to know JavaScript or any frameworks or even CSS because we will learn CSS in this course. So therefore, having the basic HTML knowledge is everything you need to get started with CSS. So how do you get the most out of this course? Well, the first thing is watching the videos, and although that's quite obvious, it's really important to state that again. Because in the videos, we will explain everything we do, and especially why we are doing and applying certain concepts. So really make sure to watch the videos, depending on the track you're entering, of course. I talked about that in the course outline, but watching that, that's the first step to really take the most out of this course. In addition to just watching, the maybe even more important thing is to code along. Take the chance and code together with us and create this nice website. Because by watching the videos, you see the basic concepts, but by really applying that and coding along, you see where you might have some knowledge gaps and where you might have to revisit a video, for example. In addition to that, also make sure to do the exercises. This course comes with a ton of assignments, quizzes, and challenges, and the best thing you can do is really do them, try your best to solve them. We offer all the solutions to make sure you know how it works in the end, but practicing is really key in CSS and actually in web development in general. Now, in addition to that, also debug your errors. Because although you code along with us, there might be cases where your code is not working at all. And for that, you can find the source code attached to the last lecture of each module. So take this code and compare it to yours and try to see where you might have made some little mistakes, for example. That's also important because with that, you take a closer look at your code, and with that, this again helps you to understand and memorize certain concepts. In case you tried your best, you tried to debug your code and it doesn't work, then of course, feel free to ask in the Q&A section of this course. We try our best to answer all your questions to make sure that all the things that are unclear become clear. But even better than just asking is, try to answer questions in the Q&A section. Because asking is easy, we know that, and answering is quite challenging. But by answering questions, you think about the concepts you learned so far again, and the best thing is, in the end, you help others. And don't worry in case you're afraid to give wrong answers. That doesn't play a role, because in the end, once the correct answer was posted, you will again learn, and well, learning, I think that's the goal of this course right here. Now with that you learned how to get the most out of this course, there is only one thing we should have a look at before we finally dive into CSS. Because what are the tools we are using in this course? Let's have a look. Which tools are we using throughout this course? Well, the good news is there are only two tools actually that we mainly will work with. The first tool is a tool you saw already when Max showed you how CSS generally works. It's our code editor, Visual Studio Code. You can download it for free right here on code.visualstudio.com, and here's the link. And of course you can use any code editor, text editor, or IDE of your choice. We just use Visual Studio Code because we think it's, well, really nice to use, really powerful, and for that, actually a quite good choice for such a course. In addition to that, we also use Chrome as a browser. Again, you can use any browser of your choice, but the main reason why we are using Chrome is that Chrome comes with really powerful developer tools. And we will dive into these developer tools throughout the course, but generally, having powerful developer tools is really helpful, especially if you want to understand the core logic of CSS and how it interacts with different parts on our website. So this is it actually. If you want to, use Visual Studio Code and Chrome. If you don't want to, use the IDE and the browser of your choice. And with that, it's now finally time to get started with the first core module of this course.